What's up, everyone? Ian and Kyle Dobbs here. We're gonna go ahead and put his information in the text box below so you guys can check that out. We're gonna start off by him coaching me through just a little bit of a breathing exercise, and I'll hand it over to him so that we can get into that.
So what we're trying to look at today is, from a postural standpoint, we're looking at extension patterns or anterior pelvic tilts. And essentially what Ian's doing here is kind of doing that classic pattern where he's got weight in his forefoot. He's got a big lumbar arch here. He's got a big chest. So if you look at where his rib cage and his head are, they're positioned right over his forefoot. So what we're trying to do is find a way to get him in his heels. So he's gonna shift back. He's gonna tuck his pelvis back under to neutral a little bit, right? Flatten out into a nice neutral spine, and then he's right here. So now he's in a relaxed spine where his abs, his glutes, and his hamstrings are supporting his axial skeleton, his spine, his pelvis, and his rib cage, rather than his back erectors, his hip flexors, and his upper traps. So we want to get to this position. We're going to start on the ground. So I'm going to have him position himself into a 90-90 position, which just means 90 at the knees and 90 at the hips. So I'm gonna have Ian arch his back up, just to find position, and then flatten it back down. Good. So right now his back is still touching the ground. I'm gonna have him squeeze his glutes isometrically. And then I'm gonna have him dig his heels into the box to use his hamstrings to pull his pelvis about 2 inches off the ground. And we're just gonna hold there for right now. Do you feel your hamstrings? Good. So I'm also going to have, because we want to get rid of that big thoracic arch, I'm gonna have him reach straight up. And now I'm gonna have him right here. So he's going to protract his scapulas rather than elevate them. So I'm gonna have him go from here to there, right? So we're gonna straighten the elbows, and I'm gonna have you just reach your hands up to mine. And this is gonna get some serratus in here as well. That's gonna help move his rib cage back in space. You notice now his ribs are down rather than flared up. And what I'm gonna have him do is take a big nasal inhale, full inhale, and a big mouth exhale while keeping his ribs down. So a full exhale. This is gonna take a little bit of time. I know Ian's got that VO too. He's gonna hold for a second. He's gonna do 2 more of these. Good. And a full exhale. We're keeping these hamstrings tight as well. He's gonna keep that reach for me. Good. And we're gonna do 1 more. Good. All right, you can relax. So what we're looking for there is when we go from an extension pattern like Ian was standing in at the very beginning, we've got hamstrings that are fully stretched. So they're tight, but they're fully elongated. So we got a glute that's not doing much. We got hip flexors that are supporting the pelvis anteriorly. We got abs that aren't doing much. And we've got lower back erectors that are supporting the lumbar spine. So we're going to use the hamstrings to rotate the pelvis under, and then we're going to use the abs to pull the ribs down, and that's going to shift all the way back. So what we're simulating here is finding hamstrings and abs to orientate the rib cage with the pelvis so that we're stacked. That's also going to align the diaphragm and the pelvic floor for better intra-abdominal pressure, or core bracing, right? Is what we're looking at there.
So one of the questions that I have for you was the idea of, most times I see a lot of people cueing this kind of stuff and they're actually talking about really flattening your entire lower back. Is there a reason that you didn't emphasize that?
So that's typically more of a strategy to get, to go from one extreme to another. So we go from more of an extended pattern to more of a kyphotic flexed pattern. I don't emphasize it simply because that's not the way we're going to load. So from a sensory standpoint, I want you to be able to find flexion in a posterior tilt of the pelvis, but we're not actually going to use that position on the weight room floor that much, right? So that's more so just, I want to find hamstrings, and if I can find hamstrings without that extreme posterior tilt, I don't feel like I usually need to go that into the posterior tilt.
Awesome. Yeah, that makes total sense. And for anybody that's watching in terms of kind of that FRC lens, what he's really saying is also that we really want to have the option there. But again, we're not going to be deadlifting with the round back just because you have that option. It's not the best option, yeah. Which I think a lot of stuff really kind of shows that. The other thing that I was asking about is, what do you think about, what are some of the sensations? Maybe we went over the exhale and the idea of really feeling that. Should you really be kind of crunching or feeling any sort of ab kind of, what would the sensation be on the front side that you would describe?
So we do want to position the rib cage neutrally, right, instead of in that extended pattern, but we do not want to be in this position crunching down, right? So we're looking at rib cage retraction, which is just shifting it back in space, rather than flexion, which is rounding the upper back. So when we're doing the breathing, as you're inhaling, you do want to be inhaling into the back of the rib cage. You do want to feel your upper back on the ground and moving into the ground. And that's also why we do that reach. So we're positioning, again, we're just getting another anterior sensory stimulus there. As we reach forward, as a byproduct, we protract the scapulus to retract the rib cage. So those two things kind of work conversely with one another. And as you were feeling kind of in this, there's a big difference between just taking an inhale and trying to breathe all the way into the back of the lungs, into the back of the rib cage, and creating space there and creating room there. And you can't do that when you're kind of fully retracted in this position. That's going to compress your rib cage even more. So you can't get the expansion that you're looking for.
And another thing that I often see with maybe that person that is asking the crunch question is they're also really overusing their neck, which is one of the things that we're actually doing this for not to do. So if you have anyone who's doing this and they start to actually, instead of just their rib cage moving back, their neck and their head are coming off, that's a big red flag against what we're really telling you to do, just so that you can be on the lookout for that. Awesome, that was really great.
Yeah, one more thing for the neck, if you do have somebody that's uncomfortable for them, you can definitely put a towel or an Airex pad or something underneath their head just to give them a little support so they don't feel like they're having to hold it up.
Absolutely. So if you're someone that has forward head posture, it might be advantageous to actually just right off of the bat, you can put that Airex pad or something beyond there that actually lets you relax your neck because it's so used to being forward that's having a hard time staying back. Then we can maybe even just slip it right under after 10 breaths and see if you can relax back into it as a progression. I really like that. That's awesome. Okay, really appreciate that with Kyle. We got more coming for you guys, and if you ever have any questions, please leave them in the text box below.